I was sitting in the downstairs living room, which I was using as a bedroom, as I was visiting my family at the time. Finishing a glass of cider, my family had gone to sleep. However, at around 1-ish, I heard noises coming from the room next door. I heard someone coming down the stairs and opening a door in the next room. I heard what I thought could be voices. I believed it was my father coming downstairs to grab some water or something. And when I went to go ask him a question about something, I can't exactly remember what. Upon opening the door, I noticed the lights flickering. If I remember correctly, I initially just froze there, staring into the room, before deciding to grab my phone and record the video that you see here. I kept hearing noises for a short time afterwards, even whilst I was replying to some of the early comments on the video. However, the noises seemed to cease when I walked into the dining room, and when I came back into the main living room that I had been sitting in when it all started. The noises and flickering stopped around 15 or 20 minutes of me posting that video, only briefly coming back for a couple of minutes around 2 hours later. I had not seen or heard anything odd in that house prior to that, and have not seen or heard anything odd since, although I am currently no longer staying there, as I have gone to stay with someone else for a few days. As far as a backstory on the house, my family and I really don't know much about it. We know it was built at some point around the 16th century. It was originally a one-story farmhouse. Most of the structure has since been renovated. However, as it is now, a 2-story house with a garage and a porch. The first of the 2 recent renovations took place in the 1960s, and the more recent renovations, well, that was finished around 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know. What do you make of it all? This happened about 20 years ago. I was 9 years old at the time, so I hope I recall this well enough, but my parents have told me their side of the story on a bunch of different occasions, so that should help. My parents are both biologists. They met at work, and from there, it's history. The place where they worked at the time was a government building dedicated to biology research used in government projects turned towards the public meaning. And they were the ones studying the environment and making environmental protection laws around their studies. This being a massive old government building, it always had a security guard present, day and night. During the day, these security guards would mostly just stay at reception and greet people. But at night, they would go do their rounds and make sure there were no intruders because of all the science equipment and computers kept in the building. One of these guards is the "let's not meet" guy. Initially, he seemed like the nicest person. He was really nice to me, and frankly, all the memories I have from him before this were really nice. He would greet me and talk to me in the nicest way every time my parents brought me to work. He would make me paper planes, which he was surprisingly good at, and throw them around with me, and he would stay with me at reception in the days my parents had to work into the night. Obviously, for me, that would get really boring, really fast. So he'd keep me company and entertain me. Mostly, we would talk, play with the paper planes, and watch TV. It all seemed nice enough for my parents to trust him with me, which was probably their biggest mistake. One night, my parents had to work even later than usual. I think it was around 10 p.m., and they were still at it, So this guy, who was on the night shift, decided to take me around the building with him to do his rounds. We started on the top floor, checking all the rooms and the exterior part of the roof. Every room was so dark that I'd always stay a little behind and wait for him to turn on the lights. Then we stepped down to the second floor, where my parents' office and labs were. We checked the opposite side of the building, going into labs with massive extractors, microscopes, and every kind of science equipment you could think of. We walked down the stairs to the first floor, where most of the administration rooms were. I still remember seeing some maps on the walls, and embalmed fish everywhere serving as decorations. The first floor was all clear, so it was time to check the basement levels. I thought it would have made sense to check the labs on the right side first, as the left side had a flight of stairs at the end leading up to where my parents were. But for some reason, he decided we'd go check that side first. We checked all the labs, but I noticed his pace was accelerating, and he was starting to look and sound happier. Excited, even. Once again, we checked all the labs, all the corners, from one end to the other, turning the lights on ahead of us, and turning them off behind us when we left. When we got to the last area, he turned all the lights on and went inside. And there were 3 separate offices on each side of the lab, and on the first one we hurried towards the printer, opening it up, took out 2 pieces of paper, and made 2 quick paper airplanes. And that's when everything changed. He picked up one of the planes, went outside of the office, and threw it towards the end of the room. Then he told me the one he just threw was mine, and that we could throw them around in there. I ran to the other side of the room to pick up my plane and excited to play with, and suddenly the lights went out. When I turned around to check what was happening, I saw him getting out of the lab, turning the lights off, and locking the door. I ran to the door, punched it, and kicked it while screaming for him to open, panic taking over because of how scared I was of being in the dark at the time. Through the glass on the door, I could see him scurrying away in the corridors, turning the lights off as he went and disappearing after turning a corner. I'm pretty sure that everything I felt and every shadow and creepy monster I saw in there while waiting was part of my imagination because of how scared I was. I balled up against a corner and could see shadows moving around me in the dark. I could only cry, lost without knowing what was happening and why he was doing that. My parents finished work eventually, and when they did, they packed up their things and made their way to the lobby to pick me up and go home. When they got there, the security guard was at reception, but I was nowhere to be found. They panicked, of course, must have shouted 100 different cuss words at the guy, and I'm not sure how my dad didn't murder him right then and there. But when they first asked the guy where the hell I was and what he had done with me, he simply said that he had gone to do the rounds with me and I must have gotten lost somewhere. And this is a building that would take you about an hour and a half to check from top to bottom, even if you're rushing. So must have gotten lost somewhere is not exactly helpful. They looked for hours without finding me. It was only when I saw a light far at the end of the corridors leading to the lab I was in that I got the courage to stand up, rush towards the door, and start punching it as hard as I could. They finally found me there and made the guard unlock the door to get me out. I don't really remember sleeping that night, and if I did, it must have been out of exhaustion. But I know I made my mom stay in the bedroom with me the entire night. Of course, my parents made a complaint against the guard, and when they did and the guy started being investigated, he was fired and arrested. Not because of locking me away where he probably hoped no one would find me, but because he had been partnering up with other criminals to steal computers and equipment from the building to sell in some shady market along with the information in the hard drives and make money off it. By then, he had stolen a lot of old computers without anyone realizing, and who knows what his plans were for me that night. I'm not convinced that locking a crying child in the middle of the darkness hidden away in some rooms is exactly the most normal behavior if you're not trying to hide them and come get them later when everyone else has left and sell them as part of your product. Luckily, he never had the chance to do that, and I really hope he never got to do it to any other kid. So I had a friend that lived in an old tenement in Warsaw. If you ever heard about Polish history, especially around World War II history, you should know that Warsaw was practically one big pile of debris. 700,000 inhabitants died during World War II. When the war ended and Warsaw was rebuilding, they didn't have money for all the materials. The city was completely destroyed, and it needed to be rebuilt, so what they often did is that they used debris from destroyed buildings. But because they had to do it so fast, they didn't have time to separate human remains from debris. So they grinded bricks and human remains and used it as a component to make constructions. Now back to the story. My friend lived in that type of tenement. The apartment had one bedroom, a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and a small hall. She shared with me 3 stories. My friend shared a bedroom with her brother. They had bunk beds and an old heavy closet with one of its doors was blocked by a heavy desk. One night, when she was sleeping alone, she woke up around 1 or 2 a.m. and heard a weird noise as if someone was moving the heavy desk around the room. She was a teenager at the time, and this sound scared the hell out of her. So she decided to cover the door with her duvet and tried not to make any noise. She was shivering, and the sound wouldn't stop. Eventually, she fell asleep, and when she woke up in the morning, she saw that the desk was moved to the center of her room, and the doors to her closet were wide open. And that night, she slept alone in the apartment. On another night, when everyone was home, her mom was sleeping in the living room and woke up in the middle of the night because she heard as if one of them was calling her. She opened her eyes, took a look around the room, but everything seemed fine. So she rolled back over, and then she heard as if someone was whispering to her ear, Mom, please, help me. Mom, please." So she jumped out of bed and ran straight to the bedroom. When she opened the door, both of them were heavily asleep. Her mom told her this story many years later. When my friend grew up and moved from her house, her brother developed the bedroom for himself and chose to sleep at the bottom of the bunk bed. At the top, he stored books and other heavy things. Everything was fine until one day. Her brother was home alone and lying on the bed when suddenly he heard the doorbell ring. He got up and went to answer it. He peeked through the peephole, but there was no one standing in the corridor, and the light was off. As he was standing in the hall about to head back to his room, he heard a loud sound coming from the bedroom. When he came back, the top of the bunk bed collapsed at the bottom. If that doorbell hadn't rung, he wouldn't be alive today. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Perhaps click the bell for notifications, and remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.